a tree that devours human souls, Louisiana keeps its secrets in the shade. Out past the highway, past the bait shops and the whitewashed chapels, the parish roads curl into the low country where the land remembers everything it's seen and doesn't care if you believe it. That's where the five of them went to study a live oak so old the maps forgot which century first sketched it. They were seniors at Tulane Maya who measured chlorophyll like love letters. Theo, a history major who collected rumors the way children collect marbles. Janelle, a film student with a patchwork of grants and an instinct for angles. Cal, a civil engineer who called himself a skeptic because it sounded safer than afraid. And Luis, a poet pretending to be a botanist because the world pays science more respectfully than rhyme. Miss DeLille, the landowner, met them at the gate with a ring of keys and a ringing in her eyes that said don't. She was 90 if she was a day, and her fingers were dark threads of work and weather. "You'll find your tree," she said, and her voice twisted on the word like it hurt the muscle to form it. "It always finds those who come to look. You be done before sunset, you hear." The gravel drive clicked beneath the tires like teeth. They carried gear tripods, calipers, canvas bags bulging with sensors down the path that sank into a shallow hollow where water slept in a skin of green. There, it stood a cathedral, masquerading as a tree. The live oak's limbs didn't reach so much as occupy, thrusting outward and downward in muscular bows draped with Spanish moss that made the air look filthy with memory. Its trunk was 100 hands across all knuckled bulges and healed wounds. The bark bloomed in plate silver, where lichens had decided to write their quiet script. The roots heaved out of the soil like something sea-made, and ancient serpents turned to wood mid-motion. Cicadas worked the heat in a constant fevered chorus. A highway far off whispered a low, cottony hush. Janelle swept a lens across the canopy and said, "We found our thumbnail," and Maya tried to smile, but something in her mouth refused. She touched the bark with the back of her hand to be respectful. Warmth lived there, faint and stubborn. Cal set the tripod legs, clamping a dendrometer around a limb with an apologetic click. Theo stood apart, scribbling a note he pretended was about the tree's girth, but really was about the way the moss hung like old rope and how the locals called this grove Gallows Green, a century before anyone dared to say the word history with any honesty. Miss DeLille didn't leave. She watched them from the edge of the clearing, a scarecrow in a denim dress. "My granddaddy told me there was a night this tree learned the weight of a human body," she said. Then another and another. That was sugar country. Men built wealth from hurt. Folks who were property were punished here when the house wanted to seem merciful indoors. She said folks and property in the same breath and flinched. Theo lifted his head. How many, he asked, and hated how his voice sounded like it was hunting a number for a footnote. "I don't know a count for you," Miss DeLille said, "and I won't guess. But I know the roots don't go down like other trees. They spread, they hold, like hands but more patient." She paused. A string of crows tore the air with three rapid cries. "Don't sleep here," she added. "Don't cut, don't carve. Don't speak names louder than a prayer. If you have to be foolish, be quick about it." They promised. They didn't mean to lie. Science has a way of keeping you longer than you intend. Curiosity does the rest. Maya charted the flare of buttress roots and clipped tiny samples with sterilized pruning shears. No drilling cores, she told Cal when he floated the idea. "We're non-invasive today." Theo documented older scars, marks too broad and shallow to be lightning, too deliberate to be storm. He photographed each one and labeled them with dates he pulled from plantation records he shouldn't have memorized as intimately as he had. Luis stood close enough to Maya to copy her confidence. "It feels like a stage," he said, "or a mouth." He regretted the second word as soon as he heard it, like he'd given something a shape it could wear. Wind slid through the hanging moss with a breathy hiss. Somewhere low in the trunk, a dry creek answered wood, speaking in a tired tongue. Janelle put microphones on the dirt like offerings and taped VU meters to her rig. For atmosphere, she said, which is film talk for the living texture of a place, the way a location is never silent, even when no one is speaking. She asked Miss DeLille if she could record her for an oral history. The old woman considered the camera like a doctor's needle and shook her head. "I already said more than I should." "One of you won't listen in time," she said softly. "Maybe two." No one laughed. Cal said, "We'll be out before golden hour, because naming a deadline makes the wilderness obey." Or so he believed in the part of his brain that had never been alone on a boat after midnight. The afternoon tilted. Dappled light turned to a spill of shadow. The air cooled not from mercy, but from withdrawal, as if something enormous had inhaled and forgot to exhale. Maya called time, and they gathered in the clearing center to compare notes. Theo, unable to restrain himself, began a story. In 1856, he said there was an overseer named Creeley who Miss DeLille's hand rose like a stop sign. "Don't bring him in," she said. "Not out loud. Not here." "Names matter," Louis said under his breath. "They always have," she replied. A single pecan shell cracked under someone's heel with a sharp, dry pop. They all flinched. Janelle tried for ease. "We're not teenagers with EMF meters," she said. "We're here for canopy density, drought resilience, carbon storage. If I go viral, it'll be because my graphs are sexy." A low murmur rose from the canopy, the leaves rubbing together in a sound like pages turning too fast. From somewhere beyond the tree line, a dog barked twice, then choked itself silent mid-complaint. Cal checked his watch. "We should pack," he said. None of them did. The tree's shadow had crept outward, and the shadow felt the way a locked room feels like the air inside is used, owned, spoken for. Theo, whose faith in logic had always cohabited with a small, malicious faith in folklore, placed his palm against a root. "They say roots remember," he said. "They map the soil's pain. If you could read them, you'd know the whole story of a place." "Let's not," Maya said. But the request had no spine. Luis found the word anyway, sacrament. He had meant sacred. The wrong syllables came out and sat between them like a dare. Miss DeLille shifted. "I'm leaving this gate unlocked," she said. "For your sake. You ever need to run, you don't want to think about locks." She began to walk. Her shoes scraped the path in a dry, steady rhythm, a metronome disappearing into the trees. The sound made them all turn, and when they turned back to the oak, the moss looked heavier. It sagged like ropes after the bodies are gone. There are stories, Theo said, because he hadn't learned his lesson. About souls caught in roots. Not just here. In Africa and the Caribbean. Botany and bondage are more entangled than we like to admit. He cut himself off ashamed. Somewhere high, a branch gave a slow, aching groan, the kind an old house makes when it settles into its bad memory. Janelle got the shot. She framed the trunk so it filled the lens like a god. They did not see the first movement. They felt the earth flex under their shoes as if a breath moved through the dirt. Maya stepped back, and her heel found nothing but absence where soil should have been. She windmilled, then caught herself on Cal's arm. He gave a tight smile, and she let him pretend he had saved her. They made the practical mistakes that make tragedies neat. They stayed to finish one last sweep, one more, reading a final establishing shot. They tucked their fear beneath the academic impulse to prove nothing was wrong. They told each other it was an animal burrow, a soft patch, a gopher, a sink of water under the loam. They lied with common sense. The oak accepted every lie. A faint breath-thin crying drifted across the clearing, impossible to place, too near to be a bird, too human to be wind. The microphones caught it, their meters ticking up in shy green needles. Janelle stepped toward the sound without meaning to, and the shadow bent with her like it wanted company. Louis touched his throat. "Air's thick," he said. "Like resin." "Pitch," Maya said automatically. "Live oaks don't." She didn't finish. A rope on an old iron hook squealed from somewhere inside the hollow trunk, the squeak of rust turning over on its own dream. Cal said it was a squirrel. No one believed him, not even Cal. They packed in choked motions. The sun sheared the tops of the trees with copper, and then withdrew. The clearing dimmed to the bruised color of almost night. Miss DeLille was gone. The unlocked gate waited like a mouth. They should have left then. They didn't. The wind stiffened and drove through the moss in tight hisses like breath between clenched teeth. Somewhere beneath their feet came a soft churning, the discreet kneading sound of something working slowly through wet earth. Theo stood too close to the trunk and found the old scars, again the ones he had photographed. They had changed. The edges looked newer, more deliberate, as if the tree had remembered the shape it once held and practiced holding it again. "Let's come back at dawn," Maya said. "Agreed," Cal said. Louis tucked a ribbon of moss into his pocket because poets steal relics and call it research. Janelle shot one last slow pan across the crown and whispered, "This is going to be beautiful." A far-off freight train breathed a long, mournful horn that washed across the parish like a tired hymn. When the sound faded, the clearing felt louder in its hush, a knuckle pressed to a mouth. They turned their backs on the oak. On the trail, the roots rose slightly like startled snakes that remembered what they were before wood taught them patience. They meant to leave. They even turned their backs on the oak and took 10 steps toward the unlocked gate, the path pooling in the last watery light. The air felt like an attic, warm, stale, and hard to breathe. Luis kept touching the rectangle in his pocket where the strip of Spanish moss lay folded, as if it were a lucky bill he was afraid to spend. Cal carried the heaviest case, telling himself that weight and purpose would keep the unease out of his chest. Janelle counted the batteries she had drained. Maya checked the ice packs for samples she couldn't take, and Theo massaged the bridge of his nose the way he did when the past elbowed too close to the present. Behind them, the microphones they'd left for room tone ticked faintly, their status LEDs blinking, and on the headphones slung around Janelle's neck, a light hiss breathed like a seashell pressed to an ear. "Wait," Janelle said. "I need the SD cards." It was a practical sentence, the kind that opens doors for bad ideas. She could get them alone, she said. It would take a minute. Maya volunteered to go with her on the logic that 2 is safer than 1, even if the math of horror rarely agrees. Cal, Theo, and Luis kept walking a slow retreat that felt like respecting a boundary, even as it disrespected every warning they'd heard. The path crackled underfoot as last year's leaves broke into thin, papery murmurs. "Don't make it poetry," Luis told himself out loud, but he was already doing it. He pictured a line. The oak keeps its choir in the ground. He did not say it. Janelle and Maya reached the clearing again and found the oak waiting exactly where they'd left it, which somehow felt worse than if it had shifted. The moss was darker now, the gray of wet rope. The microphone sat in a small triangle on the soil, like ritual tools someone else had arranged. A low tremolo moved through the canopy leaves, rubbing, then pausing, then rubbing again in a rhythm too deliberate to be wind. Maya crouched to pop the card from the first recorder. "We're good," she said. 2 more. From inside the trunk, something gave a slow, sticky creak, like resin waking inside a seam of wood. Janelle kept her eyes on the meters out of habit. The needle rose without anyone speaking, as if breath gathered from a mouth they couldn't see. "We should go," she said. Because the sentence was ordinary, it felt easy to ignore. On the path, Cal slowed. "They'll be right behind us." He looked back and saw the intimacy of dusk settling around the clearing like a blanket someone tugs up to a sleeping chin. "Guys," he called. He didn't shout. He didn't want to hear the way his shout would sound here. From the darkening trees, a far-off chain clinked against iron in a single hollow note that hung too long and then died. Theo's mouth went dry. He knew that sound. He'd read the ledgers and the memoirs. He'd taught himself not to flinch when words like stock and punishment were used on human beings. Knowing is not armor. It is the opposite. It makes every echo specific. "Keep moving," he said. Back at the oak, Maya gathered the second card. "Last one," she said, and reached. Her fingers brushed the cable. The cable moved, not from her touch, from beneath. It lifted a fraction of an inch, like a loop of rope floating to the top of a dark pond, and then settled again. A wet breath-thin sob drifted up from the soil at their knees, the kind of sound a person makes whenever a muscle has learned to cry quietly. Janelle froze. "Do you hear that?" she asked, already knowing the answer. The recorder captured it, the green bars feathering upward into yellow with a faint smothered keening. "Grab it and go," Maya said, "because action is the cheapest courage." She yanked the card. They stood up. They turned. A root lay across the path that had not been there a moment ago. It wasn't thick, no bigger around than a thumb, but it ran from the base of the trunk straight across their way, like a tripwire. Maya stepped over it. Janelle stepped around it. Neither of them looked down long enough to see the place where the root met the trunk, the puckered lip of bark wet with sap, as if the tree had licked its own wound. Cal, Theo, and Luis were silhouettes now, 3 figures on the thinning path. "We got the cards," Janelle called. She kept her voice in the shallow range like speaking to a skittish dog. The oak answered with a slow exhale through its leaves, 1,000 small frictions braided into one soft, sifting sigh. "We're leaving," Maya said to it anyway, because people talk to things when they are afraid, and because the reasonable brain will try anything to make a boundary feel assented to. They didn't run. They should have. By the time they reached the others, the light had tilted into that gray blue that looks like the bottom of a lake. "Let's go," Cal said, and for once nobody argued. Somewhere behind them, something heavy slid across bark with a rough, dragging rasp, the sound of a knot being pulled through a hole it shouldn't fit. "Don't look back," Theo said. He looked back. The root that had been a tripwire had become a net. It lay gently across the path, a lace of thin tendrils that looked like dry vines. It wasn't dry. It gleamed. Luis stepped toward it, curiosity faster than caution. "It's reacting to moisture," he said. "Maybe heat." He crouched And in the instant before Cal's hand closed on his shoulder, the smallest tendril touched the toe of Luis's sneaker. The touch made a tiny, almost apologetic tap, like a fingernail on glass. Luis flinched. He didn't retreat. He leaned closer. The tendril lifted and aimed, not at his shoe now, but at his face, questing in the air the way a blind thing learns a room. Cal yanked him back. The tendril followed, widening as it rose, and in that widening, there was a mouth. There was no time to map steps or make a plan. The tendril thinned to a whip, then split to a pair of cords that locked the hinge of Cal's jaw. His lips parted on instinct for breath, and the root found that soft opening like a key finds a lock. It slid past his teeth with a wet insistence, silk and pressure together. And the body does what a body does when something goes where breath should go, fights. Cal tried to shout. Only a strangled gurgle throbbed in his throat, a wet choke swallowed by the leaf. Hold him, Maya cried. They did Theo at his shoulders, Luis at his chest. Janelle grabbed the tendril where it entered, and it felt like warm, slick leather that pulsed under her fingers. Cal's breath made a harsh, panicked wheeze that stopped, started, stopped again, like a bellows with a broken valve. Bite it, Theo said. Cal bite. But Cal's jaw was no longer his. The root had it. It drove deeper, a steady, merciless advance, with no drama to it at all. And the ordinariness was the worst part. From inside the oak, a low, satisfied hum seemed to gather, bassy and simple, like a throat clearing after a long thirst. Luis pulled a pocket knife and sawed at the root. The blade skittered and squealed on the slick surface, and the cut he made sealed itself with a glistening glue in the same breath. Cal's heels drummed the path in a frantic tattoo. Tap, 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 then stilled. Maya pressed 2 fingers to Cal's neck. Pulse, she said. She didn't finish. The root shivered, and in that shiver, something like decision traveled its length. It contracted. Cal's mouth opened wider for an instant that looked like a scream, but made no sound. A final thin hiss bled from between his teeth, and then there was only the quiet weight of a held breath that did not get released. The root withdrew as neatly as it had entered, sealing Cal's lips with a shimmering smear of sap that smelled faintly sweet. His body sagged. His eyes didn't close, and somewhere deep in their glass, the last of his argument with the world dimmed. They lowered him to the path. Janelle began CPR because training lives in the bones. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, repeat. She didn't get to the breaths. There was no opening for air. The sap had cured to a lacquer already. Maya checked again for a pulse. She shook her head. Overhead, a branch gave a long wooden moan, and a smaller branch answered with a brittle clicking reply, like worry beads being worked by nervous fingers. "We're going," Theo said. "We're going now." Cal's weight stayed where it had fallen. The earth had a way of accepting him under the spine and the back of the skull, a shallow cradle risen out of nowhere. They tried to lift him. The ground held. "Leave him," Maya said, and the words broke something inside her she would never articulate. We can't carry him if the ground won't let go." From the microphones in Janelle's bag, a soft loop of the captured sobbing played back in a low, ghostly feedback, as if the air were teaching itself to cry in rounds. They moved. The path seemed to lengthen, the trees leaning in without moving. Luis stumbled and caught himself and kept going. Theo counted steps aloud to anchor them to numbers. Janelle's hands shook around the handles of the case. Maya walked as if precision could be a shield. No one said Cal's name. Behind them, The leaves began a distant whispering, a slow swell like an audience deciding in unison to stand. They reached the gate. It was open. Miss DeLille was not there. Lights from her house far across the field made a pale geometry against the warm black. Theo turned back once. He did not see Cal's body. He saw the oak's roots knitting the path where they had stood, and he understood what it meant to have a place take custody. A wind rose thin and high and drew the moss into tight, sibilant ropes that rasped together like cord being pulled fast through rough hands. Inside, Maya said. They sprinted for the porch light that didn't flicker, and the door that did not lock, and the phone they would ask to borrow. The house waited steady as a witness. As they ran, the clearing let out a small, shuddering chorus of creaks and sighs that faded into the lines of the field, as if the land itself were rehearsing grief. The farmhouse was small, whitewashed and tilting a little under the years. Its porch light was steady, its windows blind. The students stumbled up the steps like survivors clutching their fear in chests that hadn't yet learned how to slow. Janelle banged the door with the flat of her palm. It opened on its own, swinging inward, without resistance. Inside, the air was stale, but not dead. Furniture crouched in corners, an old rocker, a heavy bureau, a sofa with sunken cushions. Quilts hung on the walls as if to soften the place against what it had heard. There was no Miss DeLille. No sound of a stove, no shuffle of slippers, no click of a radio. Instead, there was a faint, low groan from the rafters wood, settling in tones that rose and fell like a living throat. Maya whispered, "Where is she?" But no one answered. Luis found a landline on a side table. The receiver was slick with dust. He lifted it anyway, pressed it to his ear. A hiss breathed into the line, a whispering static that wasn't random at all. It carried a rhythm, a fragile weeping like someone crying into a cloth. He slammed it down. "Dead," he said. His voice broke. "It's dead." Theo stalked through the parlor, pulling at curtains. Outside, the oak's crown was visible in slices of neat, its silhouette blacker than the dark around it. The moss swung even though the air was still. From that crown came a sound like ropes under strain fibers, tightening a faint chorus of taut sighs. Janelle set her case down and opened the playback on her camera, needing a screen, needing evidence. The LCD filled with the clearing, Cal alive, crouching, then screaming without sound as the root found him. She tried to stop it. The button stuck. The footage kept rolling, though she hadn't recorded more. Cal on the ground, his eyes open. Cal being drawn backward an inch, then another, as though the earth beneath him was slowly inhaling. His mouth sealed in shining sap. The file timestamp ticked forward. From the tiny speaker leaked a wet, bubbling choke, a noise Cal had never managed to make before he died. Janelle dropped the camera. It didn't stop playing. Maya pressed her back to the wall. "We have to leave the house. Find the car. Drive. Just drive." Theo shook his head. "It won't let us." He didn't know what it was. He didn't have to. Upstairs, a door creaked open, swinging on the hinge with a long, protesting squeal. Then came the slow, dragging shuffle of bare feet across wood. "No," Luis said. "She's here." "Miss DeLille?" he called up. "We need help." Both the steps above stopped. The silence held thick as syrup. Then came 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate against the upstairs floor, like someone rapping a knuckle against the ceiling over their heads. Knock, knock, knock. They froze. Even their breathing seemed too loud. Theo broke first. "It's not her," he whispered. From the kitchen, a faucet tossed and spat water, choking through pipes that hadn't run in years. The splatter hit the sink in uneven beats, a syncopated tapping like fingers drumming impatience. Luis moved toward it. Maya grabbed his arm. "Don't," she hissed. But Luis was shaking. "If I stop moving, I'll hear him choking. I'll hear Cal choking." He wrenched free. The sink water ran brown, thick as tea. Within it bubbled a faint, muffled moan like air rising from lungs under liquid. Luis gagged. He backed away, but his heel caught the edge of the rug. The rug shifted. Beneath it lay a pattern, not wood grain, not stain. Roots, fine as threads curling across the floorboards in whorls and spirals. They pulsed faintly like veins under skin. Janelle whispered, "It's in the house." Overhead, the footsteps resumed pacing slowly back and forth, with the dry creak of weight testing each plank. Theo's hands trembled. He thought of history, the archives. He had read the pages that spoke of men bound and broken, of women whipped, of children sold. He thought of how many throats had gasped their last under that oak. And he realized the tree didn't only root in soil. It rooted in memory, in guilt, in bones. The sound of the pacing grew heavier, louder, then stopped directly above them. A low rattling breath descended through the ceiling, the boards vibrating as though someone enormous leaned down to breathe against the plaster. Maya's knees buckled. She clapped both hands over her ears. Luis whispered a prayer, half Spanish, half English, stumbling syllables. Janelle clutched the useless camera, its speakers still whispering Cal's death rattle. Then the ceiling cracked. Fine lines spread, dust sifting down. And from within those cracks seeped a faint, high keening like nails dragged gently over a violin string. Theo shouted, "Out now!" He barreled for the front door. The others followed. They hit the porch, stumbled into night air thick as tar. The oak loomed directly ahead, closer than before, as though the house had shifted toward it. The path to the gate was gone. In its place stretched a mat of roots, glossy and damp, braided together like a net waiting for prey. From that mat rose the sound of heartbeats, not theirs but dozens, thudding in uneven rhythms, some frantic, some slow, some stuttering towards silence. Luis clutched his chest. "It's stealing them, every one of them." Maya pointed. "The field go around." They ran sideways, skirting the porch boots, slapping mud. The oak's canopy hissed as the moss whipped strands, lashing one another with wet snaps. The tree was awake now, watching. They broke into the field weeds, waist-high fireflies, sparking like false beacons. Janelle dragged the camera, still screaming with Cal's ghost sound. She wanted to smash it, but something in her felt it would scream louder if she did. Behind them, the house groaned, its roof timbers warping. Windows shattered outward, crystalline screams, glass scattering into the weeds like teeth spit from a mouth. Theo fell. Luis hauled him up. They kept running. The ground beneath pulsed, a subterranean pounding like drums played in the belly of the land. Then came the voices. Not one, not 2 dozens braided into the air, a chorus of low, choking sobs and strangled prayers. They were not Cal's. They were older, hungrier. They spoke no words, yet they filled the night with accusation. Maya screamed, "Stop it!" But the voices only grew louder. Above, the wind slammed through the branches with a roar, like canvas tearing 1,000 ropes snapping at once. The oak wasn't behind them anymore, it was around them. The field itself bent into shadow, and roots rose like ribs from the soil, fencing them in. They had left the house, they had left the path, but they had not left the story. And stories don't let go once they decide you belong in them. They hit the far end of the field and found another fence of roots, slick and woven, as if the land had learned knots. "We split," Maya said. 2 left, 2 right, Luis with me. Theo nodded, dragging Janelle toward the darker side, where the ground dipped and the oak's shadow pooled like ink. All around them the moss hissed and a fast, sand-fine whisper strand rubbing like coarse fabric drawn through fists. From below, a slow, suctioning glug rose at intervals, as if the ground itself swallowed air between clenched teeth. Luis tried to laugh and failed. At once scared. He lifted his pocket knife again. Let's give it nothing. He took 2 steps, then the turf softened. His shoe sank. Mud, he said. It wasn't. The soil puckered. A ring of roots tightened around his ankle like a cuff and tugged. He pitched forward. Maya lunged, caught his forearm, braced and pulled. The earth answered. A deep, woody creak unspooled from the oak, a patient, hungry groan that rolled through the field like a tide. Luis slid. Not fast, worse steadily. The ground under him thinned to a mouth-lips of fibrous loam, peeling back to expose a tunnel ribbed with living wood. No, 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 he whispered. Please. Maya dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around his chest. Kick he did. The root cuff climbed his calf, his thigh like a tourniquet tightening by thought alone. Close to the trunk, something heavy dragged over bark with a rasping grit, like an anchor hauled across a wooden deck. The wind climbed the canopy and broke into a flood of leaf speech, a breathy roar layered with small, wet sap waking under skin. Luis reached up with his free hand and touched Maya's cheek. Tell them I wrote something good, he said, voice calm in the way of a man who has already recognized the ending. The tunnel yanked. His hips disappeared. His ribs. Maya, he said. Don't. She refused to let go. The oak decided for her. The roots flared slick with sweet, sharp resin, and Louise slipped from her grip as if her palms had turned to glass. He vanished into the trunk's undermouth with a soft, obscene ease. A dense, satisfied thrum pulsed through the ground, one beat two, as if the tree swallowed and sighed. Somewhere inside the bowl, a syrupy plink-plink began, drops falling into a deep jar. Maya stumbled back, hands shining with sap. She looked up through tears, and in the heartwood's dark oval, she thought she saw him no face, now only a golden outline sinking slow as sunlight congealing. The resin brightened, hardening with a gentle, merciless patience. Luis, she cried. Theo and Janelle crashed back toward her. We heard Theo began, but the branch above him dipped. With a dry, splitting crack, a limb tensed and fired downward, the air popping like a whip as it broke its own restraint. Theo looked up. The branch met him with the precision of long practice. It didn't skewer messily. It pressed, drove, settled. His eyes widened, then softened in disbelief. A low, wood-deep grunt pushed out of the limb, followed by a slow crackle as fibers tightened, seat-belting him to the living spear. His breath left in two brittle huffs, then stilled. Janelle screamed. Maya dragged her aside as the branch lifted Theo an inch, then two, offering him to the crown, like a confession. Above the canopy answered with a rustling murmur, 1,000 tiny applauses that faded into a long, sated sigh. Maya set her jaw. "We go," she said, voice raw but even. "We end this at the gate or we don't end it at all." They ran two left and the oak learned their names. The gate was in sight now, a crooked outline against the night. Janelle and Maya staggered toward it, lungs scalded, legs thick as lead. Behind them, the oak's crown bent low branches, weaving together like a ceiling. Every step they took was answered by the tree with a long, breathy hush, a sound like 1,000 ropes dragged across stone. "Keep going," Maya rasped. "Don't stop." Janelle clutched her camera, though its battery had died, though its screen was black. She held it like a relic, like proof the world outside might believe them if they lived. They reached the gate. It yawned open just as Miss DeLille had promised. The road lay beyond gravel, shining faint under moonlight. Freedom should have been there. But the ground trembled, pulsing each vibration, a dull bass thud, like drums beating from underground. Roots surged, thick ones now as wide as arms, rising in arcs and slamming down to block the exit. They curled into the posts, knitting the gate shut in a single flex. Janelle screamed and pounded the wood. No, please, the canopy answered. Leaves tore loose in a furious cascade, slashing downward. Each leaf hissed as it spun edges sharp as razors. The first cut her cheek, the second shredded her sleeve. Dozens more followed, carving air with a storm of green knives. Maya shoved her flat to the dirt. "Stay down," she shouted. The leaves shredded around them, slitting soil, slicing weeds, sowing the night with flying blades. Janelle cried out. Blood spread on her forearm, thin and bright. She looked up in horror as one leaf fastened to her throat. It lay there for a heartbeat, then sank. A wet, slicing whisper cut the silence as it opened her neck. Her scream gurgled to silence. Maya staggered up, spattered red. She was the last. She ran for the trunk itself, mad with fury. "Take me then," she cried. "Take me and choke on it." The oak obliged. Vines slithered down like serpents, twisting tight around her neck with a swift, leathery snap. She clawed them, coughed, gasped. The pressure grew until cartilage cracked like brittle wood. Her legs thrashed, then stilled. The tree lifted her once, offering her limp body to its crown. Then it laid her among the roots, tucking her into earth like a seed. And silence returned. The oak stood green again, proud and vast, its branches whispering softly in the cooling air. To a stranger, it looked alive, in the innocent sense, a monument of shade, a guardian of the parish road. But when the wind rose, it carried a note not of comfort, but of mourning, a layered chorus of sighs and thin cries, as if every leaf remembered the throats it had silenced. The moss swung gently, heavy with unseen weight. To those who dared to pass beneath the rustle was no longer wind. It was the sound of rope and of souls still bound. The oak had fed. The oak had grown, and the oak would wait.